Welcome to the Queries for Participation project for the WV K-12 education problem. In this project, we're going to look at some advanced queries, including ones that incorporate results from other queries, ones that go and use wildcards in our criteria, and ones that go and manipulate the records in our database, among some other things. To get started, I've downloaded and extracted the provided data files, and I've opened up the starter file here in Access. You'll see that we have this security warning that some content has been disabled along with a button for enabling that content. You've probably seen that same warning as you've gone through the other participation projects. It's pretty standard when you open up a new Access database for the first time. For most of the time, it doesn't matter whether or not you enable content, but for this project, you do need to make sure that you enable content. If you don't, the queries that we're going to be working on that will update and delete records in our database aren't going to run. So make sure that you click the Enable Content button. The first thing that we need to do in this project is to add records for 2 additional schools to the schools table. We'll be using these as we work with our different queries. I'm going to double click on the schools table to open it up in Datasheet view, and then I'll click on the New Record button down here at the bottom to go to the end of the list. Our first record is going to have a school ID of 060901. Its school name is Steve Harvey Elementary School. It's in McDowell County, and we're going to mark that it's closed by checking the box. I'm going to tab into a new record here. This one is going to be a school ID of 051902. This is Bob Denver Middle School, and we're going to say that it's in Mercer County and that it's also closed. These are fictitious schools, and I've named them after people from each of those locations. Steve Harvey, the comedian, was born in Welch, and Bob Denver, who played Gilligan on Gilligan's Island, lived in the Princeton area after he retired prior to his death. With those records added, I'm going to go ahead and close out of the schools table. For our first query, we're going to take a look at districts where the dropout rate was greater than 1.5% for a particular school year. We already have a query that looks at dropout rates for different districts and different school years. That's Query 3D. You can see here we have the district, the school year, the count of how many schools are in that district, and then what the dropout rate is. We're going to use the results of this query in a new query, and we're going to go and just basically use the criteria on the dropout rate column to go and filter the values so that we only have the districts that have a rate that is greater than 1.5%. I'm going to close out of Query 3D, and I'm going to start a new query by going to the Create ribbon and clicking on Query Design. For this query, I'm going to drag Query 3D from the Objects pane into the query. So this is actually going to use the results from Query 3D as the source of data for this query. It's going to execute Query 3D first, grab the results from that, and then do the manipulation in this query when I go and actually run this query. The instructions tell us that we want to list each district, school year, and the number of schools, which is the school count field. And we're also told that we should only display records where the dropout rate was greater than 1.5%. So I need to add the dropout rate field to my grid here. But the instructions say that we don't want to show this in the results. So I'm going to uncheck the box for show. Down in the criteria section on dropout rate, I'm going to specify the criteria for greater than 1.5%, which we can numerically represent as greater than 0.015. Remembering that a percentage is going to be a value between 0.0 and 1.0. Let's go ahead and run this query and see what our results look like. So this is what we get. We have 3 fields and we have 27 records, which is what we're expecting based off the hint that's provided. So looks like we're in good shape. Let's go ahead and save this. we're going to call this query 6A. I'll click OK. I'm going to close it. We want to create another query that's going to be very similar to the last one. The only difference is for this new query, we want to go and view districts where the dropout rate was less than 0.5% rather than greater than 1.5% as we did with query 6A. What we can do here is we can actually copy query 6A and then modify that copy to have our different criteria. To go and copy the query, on the Objects pane, I'm going to go and right-click on query 6A. I'm going to tell it to copy. And then I can right-click in the Objects pane again and tell it to paste. It's going to open up this Paste As window where I'm asked to specify a name for the new query. We're going to call this query 6B. And I'm going to click OK. And you can see this new query now shows up. I'm going to right-click on it and open it in Design View. And you can see it has the exact same setup as 6A did. Let's go ahead and change the criteria for the dropout rate so that's less than 0.5%. So our criteria is going to be less than 0.005, which is 0.5%. We can go and run this. You can see that we have our 3 fields still, but this time we have 119 records, which is what we should have. So let's go ahead and save this query, and then we can close it. For our next query, we want to look at the schools and associated school years where pre-kindergarten was offered. If we take a look at the school statistics table, you can see we have this grade served column. And for the schools that offered pre-kindergarten, pre-kindergarten was the very first grade that they serve, since that's the very earliest grade that schools have. The ones that offer pre-kindergarten start off with PK in the grade served column. What we're going to do is we're going to create a query that uses a wildcard criteria on the grade served column to pull the records in where grade served starts with PK followed by anything after it. Let's go and close the school statistics table out, and we're going to create our new query by going to the Create ribbon and clicking on Query Design. For this query, we need to add the school statistics table because that's going to be where we'll be able to get the grades served and a couple of the other fields that we're going to use. The instructions say that we also want to display the school name, so I'm going to add the schools table for that one. I'm just going to go ahead and start populating the fields. So we want to have the managing district, we want the school name, school year, and grade served. We said that we wanted to put this wildcard criteria on the grade served field. So I'm going to go down under criteria here, and I'm going to type in the criteria that we need. We want it to start off with the letters PK followed by anything after that. For a wildcard criteria, we go and use the like keyword. So I just type in the word like, and then the actual criteria I'm trying to match against is going to go inside of double quotes. So I want to tell it like, and then I have a set of double quotes here, PK, and the wildcard symbol is the star or asterisk. And then I'm going to close up those quotes there. So what it's going to do is find anything that has PK followed by anything after it. I can go ahead and run this, and you can see that we get 3,122 records, and all of them start off with PK. Now, in this case here, I started off with the letters followed by the wildcard. It doesn't have to be that particular order. I could start off with a wildcard and then say that I want to end in certain letters, or that I just want the letters to appear someplace in the text. You can do whatever you want with that asterisk, but in our case, we're going to use it to find the end as a placeholder for whatever the end is after the PK. Let's save this query, and we're going to call it query 6C. Click OK, and I'm going to close it. For our next query, we want to view all the different combinations of grades served. Let's go to the Create ribbon, and we'll click on Query Design. And we know that the grade served information comes from the school statistics table. So I'm going to drag that over into my query. Our results are only going to have one field, just that grade served field. And the instructions say that we want to sort by grade served in ascending order. So I'm going to do that. And then let's run our query. You can see that I have a ton of records, 5,361 to be exact. And we see a lot of repeated values here. What we want to do is restrict the results so that they only display the unique combinations. So like 02-05 should only appear once. That's going to make it a lot easier to understand what's going on in our data than having all these duplicates. We want to head back into design view for this. And we're going to right click in a blank area on the top part of the query, and we'll click on properties. Make sure you don't actually have anything selected. You want it to say selection type query properties. What we're going to do here is we are going to set unique values to yes. And then we can run this query again. And you can see now, for example, each of these options, like 02-05, only appears once. Instead of more than 5,000 records, we only have 33. This is what we're looking for. This is what we're expecting now. So we'll save this query, and this one's going to be called 6D. And we can close it out. When we're working with queries, sometimes we want to be able to prompt the user for the criteria to filter the data by at the time they run the query. This is called a parameter query. We're going to create one to view school statistics by school year. Let's go to the Create ribbon, and we'll click on Query Design. And we want to be able to view information on different schools for each school year, and we also want the school name. So I'm going to add the school statistics table, and then I'll add schools. And let's go ahead and specify the fields that we need. Instructions say that we should have managing district, school name, school year, enrollment, attendance rate, and graduation rate. So school name came from schools, everything else was from school statistics. And we want our query to go and ask the user what school year they want to use. And then we're only going to display records for that school year. To do that, we're going to set up the parameter query on the school year field. To do a parameter query and create the criteria for it, we're going to basically provide a prompt to the user inside of square brackets. We're going to display a message telling the user what we need them to enter. So I've got an opening square bracket here under school year. I'll say enter school year for data, and then I'm going to put a closing square bracket. It's really important that you don't put a period in this prompt. That will go and cause other problems. So just leave out any periods. You'll also want to omit any exclamation points. The reason why is that periods and exclamation points can be used when referring to tables and their associated fields. So you'll get a syntax error if you try to go and do those. Just leave them out. So our criteria here looks like this. Enter school year for data. When I go to run this query, I'm going to get this box here that says to enter parameter value with that message, enter school year for data. You might have seen something like this earlier with a previous query if you had the name of a field or table typed wrong, or if you were missing a table in your query. It's going to trigger this same sort of enter parameter value box. In this case, let's go and test things out for the year 2019-2020. You'll want to make sure that the value is entered exactly as it appears in the data that's stored in the table. If it doesn't appear exactly as you've typed it in, it's not going to show up in your results. But I know this is correct, so I'm going to click OK. And you can see here we're getting the records where school year is just what I entered, the 2019-2020. I have 6 fields, and for this school year, the hint tells me that I should have 652 records, which I do, so we're in good shape. Let's save this, and it's going to be query 6E. Gonna tell it OK, and then we'll close this one. When we need to change the data that's stored in our database, one way that we can do it is by opening up a table in Datasheet view, and we can type in the new values we want. Maybe we go and place a filter on the values for different fields if we want to restrict things and only go and update certain records. Yeah, that's definitely one way we can do it. But if we have to make a lot of updates, this can get pretty tedious. There's another way that we can update the values that are stored in our database, and that's by using what's called an update query. And this is where that enable content button comes into play. If we did not enable content, we could not run the update query that we're going to be creating here in a moment. To get started, we want to create a new query in Design View. Here on the ribbon, we're going to change the query type from Select, which allows us to go and view data, to Update. Update's going to allow us to change the values that are stored. And for this query, we want to go and change the name of the county for some records that are in the schools table. So I'm going to drag over the schools table. And what we're going to do is we're going to set the county. So I'm going to double click on county to add it to the grid. And we're going to update to. In that row, we'll type in Kanawha. And we're going to update to Kanawha where the school ID, so I'll double click to add school ID to the grid, matches the criteria that we have listed. We're going to enter 2 criteria. We're going to say where the school ID is 060901 or, and I'm going to go down a line for the or, 051902. So those are the 2 schools that we created at the beginning of this project. So for these schools, they're going to be in Kanawha County when we're done, rather than being in Mercer and McDowell. Go ahead and run this query, and Access is going to tell me that it'll update 2 rows. And it's just verifying if I want to make these changes. I'm going to go ahead and tell it yes. Now if I were to run this query again, it's going to try to update 2 rows again. It doesn't care that we've already updated these to be Kanawha. It's still going to try to make that change. So I'm going to tell it no this time since we've already updated things once. Let's go and open up the schools table. And we can go and find the schools that we were looking at. So we want 060901. I'm going to use find for that. So we can see that Steve Harvey Elementary School is now listed as being in Kanawha County. And I can go and use find to look up the other one. This one's 051902. And Bob Denver Middle School is now also showing as being in Kanawha County. This is really helpful if you need to do bulk updates, or especially where you need to go and look up the value to set one field based on a result of a query from someplace else. That's a pretty common thing that you'll do in larger databases. Update queries are going to facilitate automating all that versus you having to manually go and type in values. Let's save this as query 6F, and then we'll close it. For our final query, we're going to delete records from the database. The same thing applies as with an update query about having to enable content. If you don't enable content, a delete query is not going to run. Let's go to the Create ribbon and we'll click on Query Design. And under the Query Type section here, I'm going to choose a delete query this time. And we're going to delete the records from the schools table where the IDs correspond with the 2 records that we added for Steve Harvey Elementary and Bob Denver Middle. I'm going to go ahead and drag over the schools table. and I'm going to double click on school ID to go and add that to my grid here. So we're going to delete from the schools table, since it's the one that's listed here, we're going to delete where the criteria matches what's below. So our criteria is going to be 060901, or, and we'll go down the line below for that, 051902. Let's try to run this query. And we're going to get a message that we're about to delete 2 rows, and we're asked if we're sure we want to do this, and I'll tell it yes. Now in this case, if I go to run this query again, it's saying that I'm going to delete 0 rows. So it goes, evaluates the criteria, realizes there's nothing that matches, and it's prompting me if I'm really sure I want to delete. Now in this case, I can tell it either option. It's not going to make any change. There's nothing to delete, so I can tell it yes. It's still going to run the query. It's just that it won't delete anything since it's already deleted all the records that match that criteria. Let's save this. And this is going to be query 6G. And then we'll close it. If you take a look at the objects pane, you can see that update and delete queries have different symbols than our standard select query. And this just drives home the fact that these are not your everyday queries that just display information. Let's take a look at the analysis question for this project. I'm going to open the analysis questions table. This is going to be question 7B. And our prompt here is mostly asking your opinion. It says that when students drop out of school, there are negative consequences which impact their learning and their physical, mental, and social development. We're asked what we think is a good way to reduce dropout rates for school. So give an answer here that, be thoughtful, explain why you're suggesting something, but there's not one right answer here. This is basically your own opinion. For my response here, I said we should use the power of data analysis tools, like what we've been doing here with Access, to try to identify students who are at high risk for dropping out. Then we should try to go through and work with those students, but also try to engage the community with some sort of community partnership to try to go and help encourage students to stay in school and help provide resources that facilitate them staying in school. Go ahead and click out of that row so it saves my changes, and I'll close the analysis questions table. To finish things up, I'm going to run the compact and repair database utility. I'll go to the database tools ribbon and click on compact and repair database. At this point, I'm done. Make sure that you exit out of Access and then submit your file.